Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode in the Conscious Parenting series hosted on the Bitcoin Consciousness podcast. This week, my guest is Rauri. Rauri and I actually met through the Momentum meditations that Sama put together back in December. And after the first episode that was released in this series, we connected because he has been thinking a lot about very similar topics. The primary theme of today's discussion is loving your kids no matter who they are and allowing them and encouraging them to be themselves. We cover a bunch of different topics, from social media to the importance of our own growth as parents, how the perception of love kind of changes as we grow up, learning to be disciplined versus following your true self, and a lot of other stuff. I really enjoyed this conversation with Rauri, and I think you guys will too. Enjoy! I have this like separate identity that is the Twitter version of me, which is, it's kind of cool because if everything is a vibration and everything, including our identities, are these unique vibrations about us, if you're creating a completely new pseudonym, you're basically creating a new identity, attracting new experiences under that name. It's very, this digital identity kind of thing is pretty cool.
Yeah, and those vibrations are going to that new identity and not your true self then. I don't know.
Right. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like you build, and the new identity may be of higher or lower consciousness. Like you might have like a shitcoin identity where it's all about, investing and making money and Dogecoin to the moon type of thing. And then you might have like a higher vibration identity where you get into Bitcoin consciousness and this kind of thing. So
yeah, I think I'm a part of too many chat groups and got too many platforms that I'm onto. It gets too much sometimes to keep up with everything you need to be in. So yeah, I'm trying to make it simpler for myself. So I've just got onto Nostr as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, so, how's that going?
Well, yeah, it's very early days, but I haven't really played around with it yet. It's very similar to Twitter in a way, but it's really, it's decentralized, open source, so it's awesome in that respect. But yeah, I feel like Twitter, I don't know, it will have a short lifespan for Bitcoiners, and we will be forced to move because of privacy stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think so too. It seems like it seems like there are a lot of Bitcoiners on Twitter that are complaining that they're still being like shadow banned and this sort of stuff.
Oh, I can see people being shadow banned because I haven't heard from people aren't popping up on my feed like they used to. But if I go into their profile, I can see that they've posted and stuff, and I'm like, something's going on here. And I'm not too sure what it is. And it's people being shadow banned. So, and I think AI will have a lot to do with it, and we'll have all these, fake accounts controlled by AI that will drive narratives and stuff like that. So, so to move us further away from the truth, I think.
Unfortunately, I mean, what social media seems like it does, if you're describing everything as a program, it's like a breeding ground for all of these different programs for people. So people are absorbing new programs, people are relaying their programs, and then you're also going through things that they're either fighting on social media, or maybe they're finding entirely new tribes on social media. They're forming, like we talked about, new identities on social media. It's, I feel like it's, as a whole, it's very, very powerful. And I don't think it's inherently good or bad, but if you have like the self accountability, the self sovereignty to understand how powerful of a tool it really is, you can leverage it in either direction.
Correct. And I think we'll probably talk about this because my eldest child, she's just got her own mobile phone, so she's jumping on her phone quite a bit. She's not part of any social media, but she's looking at the videos that are coming out of social media. So, yeah, that's an interesting point in where my wife and I are at with our kids. We've got to somehow guide them through this because you can't stop them watching it. So,
right. That's kind of a great spot that we probably could jump into it, because that was one thing on the list, is how, obviously, as a parent, so like my perceptions and beliefs about social media are that I've got a lot of negative programming around it, because ever since 2020, with the 2020 election here in the United States, it was super, it was very heated. And like, I got into some social media stuff with family members of mine. And from really that point on, I kind of developed this disdain for social media. And so I have sort of withdrawn from that sort of world. So my feeling is that, no, you don't need to use this at all. But if we go back to what I was just saying, there is a positive, powerful side if we can leverage that. So first of all, how old are your kids, and how are you teaching them this, I guess, this skill set, or the things that you know?
It's a great question. I don't think we'll find an answer, but, well, first of all, my kids are 13, 11 and 9, and so the 13-year-old is got her first mobile phone, really, and she's really hanging out to buy the new iPhone and whatnot, because all of her friends at school have got that. So first of all, comes from peer pressure, doesn't it? Just to fit in with your friends and not be the one on the sideline. So first you've got to have the best phone. And then comes all the stuff that's, on the phone, all the apps and whatnot, and maybe all the social media. However, we're not allowing our children to have social media accounts at the moment. So they avoid that side of things. However, they can access the videos and the content of those social media platforms. So that's something a little bit harder to control. But we do have, they do have an iPad each, and we do monitor their use. We do have time limits on their use, and we can limit to what apps and programs they access on the internet through a third-party system, I guess. So, yeah, there is quite a bit of control there.
Yeah. When I had my first conversation in the first episode with Sama about this topic, this came up because, we as conscious parents, the ideal understanding of your role as a parent is that we're equals and that we are guiding our kids. And so whenever we're telling them that they can't do something that they want to do, it's like you're affecting their sovereignty. And so I oftentimes have a conflict with this, because I really want, and my son's only two years old at this point in time, so he doesn't know, like, physically when he could come into harm. He could run into the street. He doesn't know any better yet. I mean, he's kind of figuring it out now, but it's just like all these things that I want him to, like, learn and experience, but also I have had the opportunity to learn and experience from social media and from YouTube and this kind of stuff, and I can see that all of these programs, which actually it's kind of a funny word, but all of these programs coming from the TV are developed. They're very fiat consciousness minded. They are designed to essentially hypnotize you to become extremely passive, and it just, like, your imagination goes away, your critical thinking goes away. These are things that I myself have experienced, in my life. And while I'm absolutely not perfect, and I still watch TV, I'll still watch sports occasionally. Like, I'm by no means absolutely zero TV, but I can just see how much it affects my mood and my connection to my higher self whenever I go through these phases of watching TV or playing video games or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it comes back to, leading by example as well. You can tell your kid not to, use his iPad for too long, whatever. But if you're doing the same thing as a parent and your kid sees you doing that and you're on your phone all the time, that's when the child's getting mixed messages and is just going to continue because you're doing it. So, leading by example, I think, is important, and I continue to try and get better at that. I know you mentioned talking about TV. In the last year, I've sort of completely ruled TV out of my life almost. Occasionally watching
Good for
sports,
you. That's awesome.
Yeah, and especially anything to do around, mainstream media and the news, I completely turn off against that. So, but yeah, you're right. The programs are designed to, dumb us down in some respect. And I think the kids will, there is some time for TV, don't get me wrong. The kids will always gravitate to that type of thing. But as long as you can provide them with alternatives during the day or during the week, like doing activities to them, or, even just going for a walk with them or riding their bike with them, or, just jumping in the pool with them, they love that type of thing, but they just need to be sort of pushed in that direction a little bit sometimes. They might complain, but once they start doing it, they love it. So, yeah, that's how we sort of approach it at home at this stage. Yeah, but all my three different kids, they all have different personalities, so you've got to approach it differently with all of them as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue, because one thing I wanted to talk to you about is how do you feel each of your kids is mirroring your programming? If you look at everything around you as being a mirror for your filters on the world, how have you noticed as your kids grow how they mirror and help you to grow?
Yeah, I think if I look at my children, I think the oldest and the youngest, it's the girl and the boy, they are definitely very similar with themselves, but they're also very, very independent as well. They are their own selves, whereas I look at my middle child and she's very much how I reflect upon how I was as a child. And what I mean by that is she's built layers upon herself, and she's sort of a little bit afraid of her true self. And I think that's a mirror of who she is and how we've parented, I guess. And I'm at the stage where I think we sort of need to reverse a little bit of that, because I don't want her to end up almost not the way I am now, but the way I've grown up. Yeah, because this is a reflection on how I grew up. I certainly put a lot of layers upon myself and protected myself, I guess. Yeah, and was fearful of who I really was, and that's only come out now in my later life. So, there's always work to do, I guess.
Yeah,
but always time to change as well.
Exactly.
So, and I'm just sort of really happy that I can acknowledge that type of thing and see it. Because if I can't acknowledge it and see it, then I can't do anything about it. So as I grow, and uncover more of myself, that's going to reflect back in my kids at the same time. So it's not something you can flick a switch straight away. It's a gradual, slow. It's a low time preference thing for sure.
Yeah. The spiritual growth of your kids, to me, it seems like, well, we know this for a fact, that it's all of our own choice. If we want to connect to our higher self, it is 100% up to us. And you're not going to be able to control your kids. The only thing that you're going to be able to give them are tools and to help, and maybe some modeling, I guess, to help explain the world around them and that sort of thing. Which kind of leads me into one thing that I was thinking about, you kind of mentioned like with your middle child, how it reminds you of what you went through as a kid. How would you, if you could go back and maybe redo your childhood, or maybe go back and tell yourself anything, help yourself in any way, how would you sort of improve or maybe enlighten yourself so that you wouldn't have gone through that?
Oh, great question. Well, I would have probably said to myself, everything will be okay. And, you know, everyone loves you, basically. And that's the crux of it. And I want to come back to what we can give our children. And I firmly believe that it's really almost quite simple, and it's unconditional love. No matter what happens in whatever, whoever they are and however they behave, if you can give them unconditional love, I think that just replaces anything else that you can do. And it's almost that simple, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like it's a simplicity that is so buried amongst so many other things, because when I grew up, it didn't matter. It didn't matter who I was as I was a kid. But then I started kind of growing up, and then as I learned, it started to feel like love came from things outside of myself. So love came from the good grades, love came from the accomplishments, love came from the number of friends, this sort of thing. And I look back at that now, and I try to determine my life's direction at this point. And it's like trying to get those externalities are just, first of all, they're fleeting. They go away. Other people forget about them. You forget about them. They're just like temporary highs, kind of like watching TV. It's just a temporary sort of satisfaction. So to be guided by these externalities is so empty. And it's kind of like a drug addict where you just kind of need to get more and more and more. So the more attached to that stuff, the more that you attach like the externality to love, which is, I think, what kids crave naturally, is, like you said, unconditional love. And when the people around them aren't giving them that, they sort of start to blur the line between unconditional love and sort of like the pride of the people around them, and the accolades from, and the status from the people around them. And they're like, okay, unconditional love is this other thing outside of myself.
Yeah, I can completely empathize with what you said, because, I grew up in a house where there was expectations, and parents like to be proud of their children and their achievements and whatnot. And you seek the externalities, as you said, that you try and chase. And I've chased them for a long time of my life. And it's only really in the last few years that I've realized that that's not what it's about. And you're right. It's like, short-term highs, and then you go, well, what's sort of next type of thing, and you do all these achievements, and then you sort of still feel empty at the end of it. And I'm at the stage where, well, it's not about that anymore. The answers are inside us. You just got to find them, and the love that we seek is also inside us. If you learn to love yourself, not learn to love yourself, but there is love inside you for yourself, and I sort of lacked that as a child growing up. So,
right. So how do we teach that to our kids, that the love comes from within?
Yeah, I think you show them love unconditionally, first of all. And then I think it's how you portray yourself to them and how you look after yourself. Because they see what you do all the time, and they take cues from you. So, but allowing them to be who they are, and not trying to tell them to be something that they're not. That was your comment about letting them be sovereign as children. So And it's very easy for parents just to tell kids what to do and what not to do and how to behave a certain way. I think that's the fine line. And I'm very conscious of that at the moment with my children. Whereas before I would have been, no, you can't do this or that and whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, allowing them to be. So do you find that as you parent that you're oftentimes putting a lot of your actions under a microscope?
Yes. Yes. And the trick is catching yourself before catching yourself before you act in that way, I guess. Yeah. But a lot of the times I'm trying to let them be who they are, really. And not trying to tell them what to do. Yeah.
So what was it like for you in the early years of parenthood, as far as maybe you weren't at that point? You said it was just in the last few years that you kind of went down, started your spiritual growth. But what was it like for you in the early years, where I'm at with a toddler, and how was it changed?
Yeah, it's a great question too. I've been thinking about that. I mean, I look at myself and how my father parented me and whatnot. And then I look at myself and how I parented my children. And I know I was very involved with them as young kids, whereas I think my father wasn't. Like, he was very hands-off physically. And I felt like that has perpetuated through to me, to the way I am. So I was very conscious of that with myself and my kids. So I was very hands-on with them. But yeah, I think I did try to give them a lot of structure and set their boundaries for them. Where as I was taught by my parents, I guess. Yeah.
So one thing I really want to ask you about is attachments, because you've been working on your spiritual growth for quite a while now. So as we both know, the more that you are attached to a thing or a person, the more that you have a resistance to flow. So, like, for me, I have so much unconditional love for my child. I feel so passionately in love with this human being that I don't know how to not be attached to him.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was going to bring up attachment because it's very important for children to have. Because I think, again, I mentioned unconditional love, and I think the other thing is attachment to your children. I know when I grew up, I did not have any attachment to my father at all, which was, and I could see that now, but as a child, you don't know, that's just the way of the world. Your reality is your parents. You can't reflect on what you don't have. But, I mean, I'm attached to my kids, very much so. But again, this is only a new thing that I've sort of worked out. I read a book as well, Hold On to Your Children, Dr. Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, and he speaks about attachment is the key for all parent-child relationships.
So define attachment in those terms, because when I speak of attachment, I'm thinking of the expectation of my mother and father. So just to give you an example, so my mom and dad, I grew up sort of under like a blanket expectation, which was, as long as you're trying your best, we don't care what the outcome is. We just want you to put 100% in. I mean, probably not. There's definitely worse expectations out there for kids. Yeah, it's really a pretty good one. But the issue that comes up in my adult life now is that I still have this attachment to this expectation. And after analysis and letting those things sort of flow through me and release them, I came to realize that expectation basically pushed me to judge everything I did all the time. If I did something, did I do it well enough? Did I really do it the best that I possibly could have? Was it good? Was it bad? So everything was still under this lens of, was it my best? There was always something that needed to be, it needed to be like stacked up against. It needed to be measured up against. So I still had this expectation. So,
well, then you're in a sort of in a state of fear, almost a fear of failing, or fear of not being good enough, or fear of failing, and then you feel shame. I mean, I grew up like that as well. Your parents said, "Oh, you get a good job, whatnot. Go to university, do well," and that was all well and good, and I did do that, albeit I did it later in life. But then after that, you realise, well, that's not necessarily the case. So yeah, I had that attachment as well, and I think what kids are too often installed with the fear of failing, and those feelings of fear and shame, they can be quite destructive in people as they get older, because those attachments last. So I think I'm not worried about. I've lost the attachment of having to succeed in the fiat world type of thing, and having the status of a great job and whatnot. That doesn't worry me at the moment. So, but I still have an attachment of a little bit of failing, or not being good enough. And I think they're very dangerous things to install in children at a young age. So, and if we go back to letting them be who they are, letting them to do what they want, and letting them be sovereign, I think, that's more of a better outcome for them in the long run.
Yeah. What do you think of the approach of, instead of failure being a good thing or even a bad thing, just being okay with it, not having expectation?
Yeah, that's a powerful thing, because failure is important, because you get better at things. You learn from things if you fail, but don't let it put you down, and don't let it destroy you in a way that's a negative. Just being okay with it is normal. That's what it should be. So, and don't let other people's perceptions of you failing, everyone's their own worst critic. Well, I can be my own worst critic. So, not healthy.
And I think we install that criticism program as a self-protection mechanism. Like the other day, I was playing pickleball, and pickleball is, if you know what it is, but it's basically like a lighter. It's like tennis light is basically what I would call it. So It's not quite as intense as tennis, but it's still a lot of fun. And what's really cool about it is you can be very strategic. And so really the idea is that you have to be very strategic. It's not so much about physical strength. Anyway, a sport like this really lends to anybody being able to play. It doesn't matter if you're athletic or not, old or young. And the group of people that I was playing with regularly were all retired. They probably lived at least twice my lifetimes, a lot of them. And a lot of them, when something wouldn't go right, they would beat themselves up out loud. And I was like, I also tend to do this when I'm playing on a team and this sort of thing. And for me, I think it has a lot to do with protecting myself in a way that I am outwardly showing to those people, hey, don't worry, I already know that I messed up. I already know that I'm having a bad game. You don't have to get mad at me. I'm already beating myself up. So it's almost like we install this protection mechanism so that we don't have to endure receiving the negativity from other people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I look at my children, and when they either play board games together or say they're shooting hoops on the basketball, my son, he gets frustrated that he can't, because he's only 9, so he's not that tall. but he gets frustrated with himself that he can't get the ball in the hoop sometimes. And sometimes he will just give up. It can be quite funny. But, the next day he'll have another go. But it's all too easy for children just to go, no, I just give up and not try and, a bit, because they can do it. They just don't have the will, or they just don't know that they can do it. And I was like that as a kid. I often didn't want to do things, probably because I didn't think I was good at it. And I was, fearful of failing in front of other people. And that's something, I'm very conscious of my kids, but also not pushing them too far to make them do something they actually don't want to do. So
I love this topic because one thing I really wanted to ask you about is, so I'll just give you an example. So the other day we were talking, I don't know if it was at Christmas or something, but we were talking as a family what it was that, I don't know how we got on the topic, but we were talking about regrets and things that we wish we would have stuck with. And, some people are saying, oh, I wish I would have stuck with piano or learned, X, Y, and Z. And even in that moment, I was like, do you wish you would have stuck with that thing? Do you wish you would have played hours and hours and hours of piano and become really good? Or do you wish you were good at piano now? because there's a huge, huge difference. And for me, I played basketball when I was in, I don't know, 7th grade or something like that. And I sort of have one of those regrets. I think I could have been pretty good at basketball if I would have stuck with it. So for me, my sovereign self just wanted to give up on this thing. And my parents said, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to do it, which I can respect that decision too. So do you think there is a way to determine, okay, this actually, it is in your best interest to stick through this? And how do you determine if that is, if it's the time to sort of nudge your kid to continue on doing this thing that maybe they're like having a hard time with? Or,
well, I'm in exactly that situation at the moment with our middle daughter, who's not very sport minded, because the other two kids are. So we're wanting her to start netball. So she's actually going to a day clinic today to sort of learn. So she's very resistant to go, but we've sort of come up with a deal. If you do this for one season, you can go back to the sport that you really want to do. So, which is soccer. But we feel netball's more of a better team for her. So, yeah, she's amenable to that. And if that doesn't work out, she'll be going back to soccer. But then on the flip side, my eldest daughter, she's very sporty and she's very good at netball, whatever. And I run every morning and she sees that I run every day. So in the last month, she started running every day and she's actually timing herself and she's actually faster than me at running. So, and I haven't asked her to do that. She's just takes it upon herself. So I don't know what the difference is. It's just, what she's older, but she's obviously looked at what I'm doing and she's like, oh yeah, I'll have a go. So yeah, again, being a good role model in that respect without telling them, what to do. What it rubs off on some kids, So
yeah, for me, what I've noticed is like we don't really tell our son to say please and thank you. Occasionally, we need to sort of nudge him if we're around other people. But on the average, he just hears us say please and thank you, so he picks it up, type of thing. So it's the same sort of thing. It's like you model the behavior and they will pick it up. Yeah. And that can also be a bad thing as well. So this goes back to putting a lot of our behaviors under a microscope, So
yeah,
I wanted to expand the question too, because as we go through this journey, I'm beginning to learn that anything that really feels like it's forced or unnatural isn't in flow, right? So the idea is that the highest self, when connected to the highest self and living through the highest self, everything just feels natural and everything feels like it just kind of flows, right? It doesn't feel like it's forced. So I wonder if when we run into these periods of frustration with a sport, like, where you're not hitting the basketball hoop and that it's just not
Mm-hmm.
dropping through and you just get so frustrated that you just want to quit altogether, that instead of, teaching kids that, no, you have to force yourself through it. You have to stick to this. This is just a downward, like, this is just like a bad day. And, this is all part of learning something new. I wonder if instead of taking that approach, if it's more like, okay, now is your opportunity to sit with these frustrations, to sit with this pain and
Mm-hmm.
to dissolve it, to heal yourself. And at the end of that dissolution, how do you feel? Do you want to play basketball? Or do you think, you know what? I feel like I've kind of had my time with it and I'm ready to be done.
No, I agree. Definitely agree. How do you, I mean, as an adult, I think I can do that, but then how do we then show our children that they can do that?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
that's like the ultimate question.
I've taken 45 years to work that bit out. Yeah, I reckon, again, if you can show your child, if you get frustrated, you can sit with those frustrations too. And again, they'll see how you do it and then they'll learn from you. I mean, children learn by osmosis. You don't have to verbally tell them a lot of things. They'll learn just by parents. Parents are the compass for a child, hey? All adults are compasses for children. So the child, the way I see it, is the child is always trying to seek the compass, for themselves. And that's more often than not parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better.
Yes. And this sort of leads me into another thing about communities and how we bring up children. Because I think the lack of community today is really, it wasn't once what it was really. So there's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, that type of thing. So I think outside of parents, I think it's important that children, spend other time with other adults, whether that be great grandparents or, the neighbors or whatever, as in a community. Yeah, that's also important. And I think we've lost a lot of that.
Deal too. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that it's a really big deal. I remember it was probably actually around the time of the 2020 election. Some politician this was actually when I was following that kind of stuff before I sort of swore it all off. But I remember hearing one of the politicians say, it takes a village to raise or to raise a kid or something like that. And I remember being like rejecting that statement so strongly because I didn't like the politician in general, and I didn't like what the person was vying for, whatever the regulation was, something to do with education probably. But that is still true. The politician may have perverted it, but what I have come to understand through all of this is that the more that the community can be focused around your locale and the individual person. So like you and I are part of a community, part of this Bitcoin consciousness kind of movement, people who care so strongly about their individual sovereignty and their spiritual sovereignty. And that comes from a place of love. And because we're coming from this place of love, it encourages us, it incentivizes us to not just improve ourselves, but also to seek help from other people, which is kind of what I'm doing with this podcast, to learn about parenting from a consciousness perspective and standpoint. But it also helps other people because, I hope that while when I submit this podcast, somebody gets some value from it. And I hope that, from our conversation today, I hope you're also getting value from it. So, when we come from a place of love and the community is based in love and focused on the people within that community, and it's just so much on a such smaller scale, it does wonders for people. I think that's really how our species is meant to work.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned asking for help. I certainly grew up in an environment where I felt I couldn't ask for help, I guess. And once that's instilled at a young age, that's very, again, detrimental going into adulthood and whatnot. People should not be ashamed to ask for help. But our society has sort of created this world where it's shameful to ask for help, or it's not manly to ask for help, or, it's being vulnerable and asking for help is more courageous than not asking for help. So, yeah, that was just another thing to add.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point to add, because there's a couple things there. You had mentioned the word vulnerability, and there is this inherent assumption that when you ask for help, it means that you are somehow less of a person because you are unable to take care of yourself. And that's a big one. I think a lot of people believe that, they believe that if they need to ask for help, that it somehow makes them a lesser individual. Especially when you come into a community like our own, the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin consciousness community. It can be easy for people to be like, well, I am my own sovereign individual. I can do this by myself. And while that is very true, you might be wasting a lot of time, because when you ask for help, you can unlock things, unlock perspectives. You can dissolve filters, programs, models that you would otherwise maybe take years to sort of work through.
Yeah. And this comes back to, it's the fear. People aren't vulnerable because they're installed with fear. So, yeah, and that's installed at a young age. And that's how, governments want us to live in fear, because that's how we can be controlled. So,
right, exactly. Yeah, and we're not going to be scared anymore.
No, and being vulnerable is love, basically. So, yeah, if you can show love and feel love, you're winning, really. That's all you need.
Yeah, it's almost like vulnerability is the openness to love. It's just like opening yourself up and asking for somebody else to give you some of their energy, give you some of their love.
Yeah, that's right. Huh. Yeah, we're coming back to simplicity, really, aren't we?
Have your kids expressed any interest in meditation or spiritual growth?
No, but it's funny because they know what I do in the Bitcoin meditation space. They don't understand. They think it's a bit funny, but that's cool. I mean, they've been raised in a religious household from my wife's point of view, so very Catholic, I guess. So they understand that side of things. And then I'm sort of the other side. I'm the spiritual dude, So yeah, it's an interesting balance. They haven't shown interest. If they ask me, I'll tell them what I'm doing, and then they can work it out for themselves, really, eventually. You know the book series, The Tuttle Twins?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yep.
You heard of those?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kids' books, but they're libertarianism books to teach kids about what we're talking about, really. So I've just ordered those actually from the US. So I have told them that these books are coming, and I'd like them to read it if they want to. So
yeah, that's really cool.
So I'm not trying to tell them what they should do, but as long as I can open their eyes to different aspects of things, and then if they latch onto it, great. So it might take them a few years and different perspectives, and they might reflect one day and go, "That's what he was talking about."
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, ultimately, you came to this place in your adult life where you're unraveling a lot of these filters and stuff and healing. And I think that's one thing. It kind of makes me sad to think about, but we have to trust that our children will also they're going to go through things. They're going to, but eventually they will begin to figure out how to heal themselves as well.
Yeah, it's funny that, we shouldn't need to do any healing, hey? Isn't it crazy?
Very true. That's very true.
Yeah, but, wow, we've done such a good job on ourselves of not being ourselves, and then suddenly, I'm 40-odd years old and suddenly I have to heal myself. It's almost like, what have I been doing all my life?
What led you to that point that you decided I need to,
Well, I guess it wasn't a decision. It was, I guess I experienced the dark night of the soul event, where we go to some dark places in our heart and you just think, things aren't right. Something's not right. I mean, I had some traumatic events in my later childhood where my mother passed away and my sister passed away. And then, around 2 years ago, my father passed away. So suddenly I was sort of left, I'm the only person left in my direct family, really, type of thing. And I hadn't dealt with those past traumas from when my mother passed. And it's just a build-up of stuff that I just repressed my whole life. But I didn't have the tools or the knowledge that I had to deal with this thing. And it forced its way out, really. And that sort of woke me up to all of this stuff. And Bitcoin was just a part of it. And it's happened, it was like a pressure cooker and someone released the valve. And there was a really rough time there for a year. But I'm so much, I'm out of that and I'm so much happier now. And the journey is beautiful, really. It is moving out of that fear and moving into that space of love and those different frequencies that make it, worthwhile. I know, I can see, I can see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, really.
Yeah.
So, it's a beautiful journey. Yeah. So I'm just lucky that I was able to acknowledge it and deal with it and not repress it. And that's being that vulnerable bit and then being able to deal with it internally and then being able to talk to other people about it at the same time. So, my journey is my journey. It is unique. I understand a whole lot more, than I did 10 years ago. So, and also comes back to the fact that I realized that most of the things that you were taught is an utter lie. And it is coming back to seeking the truth. And it's what we seek is the truth. And that's the healing bit. Yeah. It's a long way to go still, but it's the journey and I love it.
So what would you say is the number one truth if you had all three of your kids here in front of you right now, what would be the number one truth right now that you could teach them or tell them?
Oh, great question. I think don't be afraid, love. If you have love for yourself, that's all you need. It's not, that's, simple again. Yeah. Look inside yourself. Your answers are inside yourself.
Yep. Yeah, that's very good.
We keep going back to seek external answers for everything and external pleasures to fulfill ourselves, but that's not the case. That's what I've realized. So.
Yeah, I mean, the entire world around us is built that way. Yeah, everything is that way. And recently, I've sort of begun to look at sex differently. I know you're probably not quite to that point and maybe talking to your kids about that, but
no.
That's an entirely different subject, even for me, because I was never really, I was taught like in the public school system about what it is, but now I have begun to look at it in such a completely different light. It's almost like I am learning all about it myself. And so it's almost like I have to learn it first before I can teach my kids,
Yeah. I mean, that's my wife being quite Catholic, which is great. She's taught them a lot about that. Well, only the oldest one, I guess. So, yeah, I haven't really thought about that bit, about that part of things.
Yeah, it's so the way that my models of this have kind of evolved is, instead of it being about the pleasure and about the biological aspect of it, it is about love. It is almost as though our bodies were designed to exchange and express love in a physical way. And so when you remove the temporary sort of high, the tension, like almost like the heat, it completely changes the dynamic of it. And and when I look at the way that it is expressed through the whole of society, everybody it's like, how can I, engage sexually with this person? What is the sexual energy of this person? It is so messed up in everything that we see that we've just been completely blinded. And so that's why I said that's like, it feels like I'm learning about this subject from square one, because nobody understands this, or very, very few people understand what is going on here.
Yeah, I think the act of sex is the most vulnerable place you can put yourself as well, in terms of where your heart is.
Yeah, exactly. And if you equate vulnerability to the ability to receive love, I think that's a perfect explanation.
Yeah. Yes. I have all that to look forward to with my kids.
Yeah, me too. Like I said, my son's only 2, and we have another one. We actually have another one coming in 3 weeks.
Cool. Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, you'll be busy, mate. You'll be busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have different challenges as they get older.
Right, and that is what is amazing. I look back at even a couple of years ago when my son was just born, and I can hardly remember what it was like being a parent back then, which is so weird. I mean, it was only 2 years ago, but I was trying to reminisce what he was like and what I was like, and things have changed so rapidly that's like constantly things are just flowing. That's what's amazing about kids. It seems it's like they're so naturally connected to their highest self that energy will just flow. It just continues to flow. And so as a parent, if you resist that, if you try to control them, they only fight back more. If you instead will let that energy flow and learn from it and grow from it, it's still not necessarily easy, but it becomes a much more pleasant experience.
Yeah, I like how you said when children are born, they're connected to their higher self. And then, we just change it along the way, hey? While society disconnects them further as they grow, which is, it's not the pure self, is it? It's why we need to let them be who they are.
Right. And I think that there is something to be said about the DNA of, that is passed down to them, where, they're also dealing with a lot of the problems of, of our ancestors as well. And so even if you, I don't even think this is possible, actually. So this is probably a good thing to discuss too. But if it were possible to be a quote unquote perfect parent, to do everything right, I still think that the children have to live their own lives, and they have to experience their own patterns, and have to experience the darkness of their own DNA and heal themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I've become aware of, is the DNA I've inherited and the past traumas of my parents. That's very much in my mind. And I've consciously almost said to myself, this sort of stops with me, and it doesn't, as best I can, carry down to my children. Yeah, and that, I don't know how that's going to play out, but I'm very aware of it. So
do you find that understanding a lot of generational patterns is helpful for you in your process?
yes, for sure, it is very helpful. But also not being critical of that, having compassion for what they went through, I think is important. You can't be angry with them. It just is. And that compassion is showing love for that, for them, if they're not here or whatever. Yeah, we can be angry with it, but that's not going to change anything. I think if you work with it around coming at it from love is the key.
Pretty powerful, for sure. I think that there are definitely patterns that I see between my father and his father and my mother, and it's just I can definitely see those things, and I think it is easier for me to heal from them because I can sort of understand the origins, or what I believe are the origins. But I also don't know that it's necessary either to rationally understand where these behaviors and programs come from. Maybe it's just something like, okay, for instance, I know people that are claustrophobic. They really hate being in tight spaces, and it really stresses them out. That could be a ancestral thing from, tens of generations back. And so it's not necessary to know that, okay, this horrible thing happened. Maybe this person was like buried alive or something horrible happened to them. It's not necessary to know that that is what caused it. But instead, it's more important to sit with the fear and to let it heal instead of trying to avoid, every situation and give into the stress and run away from the fear. It's letting that heal. So, and I think what's really cool about being a parent is you also understand. So you have the same DNA as your kids. And so if you have some of this ancestral programming, you actually have the ability to explain to them, here's how I was able to heal from this. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
And I think if the kids can they pick up on your healing as well, hey, I feel, they pick up on your vibrations and where you're at. Mm-hmm. Going back to the osmosis thing. Yeah, I'm just glad I'm on my journey. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I can, without telling my kids, I'm glad I can show them other ways in some respects. So they might not get it now, but they might, they would have seen things that I've done. And when they're faced with something, that will come from their subconscious, and hopefully that will, guide them the right way in that fashion, I think.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about the energetic attachment of having similar DNA. Is as you raise your vibration, it helps to kind of raise the vibration, raise the awareness of the people that are connected to you. And this, even if you're not closely related to the people, just physically being near someone who is very confident in themselves and loving and connected, you can just feel that. You can just feel that, and it brings up your vibration as well. So I think it's so powerful.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, I think my middle child, she's very protective of her space, who she lets in at times, even her parents. So, and this is coming back to her being trusting in herself and being vulnerable to open up to receiving that love and that vibration you were just talking about. So that's something not so much I have to work on, but something I'm very conscious of with her. So, and I think I just have to be accepting of it at the moment. And then hopefully as she gets older, that will just break down and she'll be more comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to envision how I will approach this type of stuff as my son gets older. But I really want him to want to learn what it's like to meditate and to go within this type of thing.
Yeah.
Do you think your kids would be receptive to that if you were like, hey, let's try sitting and meditating together for 10 minutes?
Oh, yeah. I think so, definitely. I could see they could find it weird, but that's just them going into the unknown for themselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's really odd because we, as society and parenting, changed them that much that they can't sit with themselves, in silence for a period of time. So
right, how is it that even at this stage in their life they already feel that it's weird?
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, but then you can take that back to, as you said, DNA. What's passed down through the DNA, and then time in the womb as well. It all starts there, doesn't it? Really. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Maybe there is generational healing that has to happen. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised, huh? So we just think of parenting as what happens after the baby comes out of the womb.
Yeah, that's very true.
But we've discussed everything before, but we just haven't included in under the guise of parenting, have we?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's the way I see it. Yeah. They're already inbuilt with maybe some programs and maybe some layers. So yeah, I don't know. That's just something I've really thought of just now. I haven't unraveled it any further.
Right. So and that's what's really speaks to the idea that as a parent, you are equals. You are the only thing really that you have above them is your experience in your own life and your experience in a similar body to theirs. So if you approach it as like, hey, I'm a human being just like you, I've experienced a bunch of problems, I know some various ways to work through them, to work through the problems, and here's what worked well for me. But ultimately, it is up to you. And yeah,
I agree with that, because I think we, as parents, we are humans. We have to include them in parent discussions or adult discussions, because they are human. And treating them as equals is important. But I think sometimes we don't give the kids enough space to be included in the adult stuff. And that's going back to community as well. It all ties in. If you get the adults and the kids mixing as a community, I think there's a better balance, because the kids learn much more than being told, the adults are talking or whatever, please don't disrupt us type of thing. I think if they're more included, they'll learn more from that.
Yeah, you bring up a fantastic point. I think that parenting at this stage, for me, what I really notice having a 2-year-old who is bouncing off the walls, exploring everything is so new and fun and amazing, and he will also burn the house down if you let him. It's just being present with him. The thing that I really struggle with as of late is the propensity for the adult in the room to just put him in front of a screen because they have something more important to do. And don't get me wrong. I've done this. I'm not saying I'm any better, but I'm really trying to work on this because what happens is I am with this person and he just needs my presence really more than anything. And so to basically put him in front of a screen or something like this to distract him so that I can do my quote unquote more important thing, for me, it really teaches me a lot. I don't know I think that there's got to be an element where he's able to play by himself and this sort of thing, which we're kind of working on now. But also, a lot of the time, the reason that we're encouraging him to go and do something without us is because, well, we have more important things to do. We're adults, so we have to go and do this, this, and this.
Yeah. It's very easy for the modern parent to put the kid in front of the screen if they're, having a tantrum or something, but that really doesn't solve anything at all. It's like telling your kid to go to their room if they've, misbehaved or something like that. That's not going to solve anything at all. Or telling a kid if they're being a bad person. That's very destructive stuff.
So, what do you do instead? Like, okay, I always like to use my child's case examples because, being 2 years old, they're a lot simpler. So, let's say, if my son, he throws something in the toilet, how would you approach behavior from like a conscious parent?
You could probably just suggest that's, not the best thing to do. But I think, raising your voice or being angry at the child is more destructive than anything. So just, I would think, just in a gentler way, point out that's probably not the best thing to do, but come at it at a place of compassion and love and not out of anger.
And that's easy to do. I mean,
mm-hmm.
they are human beings, so they can pretty quickly and easily determine how to wear you down,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like they know how to make you break.
Yes.
And maybe that goes back to the idea of people being mirrors for one another. Kids are so in tune with what makes them mad, and so they reflect that to you as the parent. So in those times, it can be so easy to get really, really heated and really, really upset.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's really cool at this point in my spiritual growth is now I can retroactively notice my programming re-engage.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if in the moment I yell at him or, like I slam a door or something too hard, I look back and I'm like, okay, I see now what happened there. And more, like my personal trick for this is to just maintain consciousness of breathing. So if like I feel myself starting to kind of flare up and like there might be a reaction coming out of me, okay, it's just time to be present. It's time for me to take a breath here.
Yeah.
Realize what's going on, and then let go. I don't know if you have a similar.
Oh yeah, and it's just realizing the feelings that are arising in you, and then having the wisdom just to be present and know where those feelings are coming from, and then being able to not act on them, so to speak, but just as you said, be present and breathe. But the kids can trigger you very easily. They know your triggers. They're very smart.
Yeah, I'm sure you know that quite well because your kids are.
Oh yeah. Yes, and it's the key is those triggers are from your past. That's all they are. So you just need to let them be, and don't give them any time, really.
Yeah, for me, one of my greatest triggers, and I think this was actually passed down from my parents is respect. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm quick to feel like an action is taken out of disrespect, that this person is doing an action which violates my
Mm-hmm.
perceived expectation of how they should respect me. And
Yeah.
so sometimes when I see, and this is just crazy talking about it because I know I know he's only 2 years old. So like if my son stands there with the fridge door open, I can feel
Yeah.
this filter bubbling up where it's like, this kid isn't listening to me. He's not respecting me.
Yeah.
I'm like, but now I talk about it now and it sounds ridiculous because he's 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. But you kids can teach. The other thing is kids are teaching me as at the same time. You know,
Yes.
parents, we're always told that we, the parents, are teaching our children, which is true. But on the other side of that, the kids are teaching the parents as well. And
Yes. Just as much.
they're actually holding the mirror. You know, they're the guys holding the mirror up at you. So, yeah, hence
Yeah.
these conversations.
Yeah. And that's actually what leads me to the last question, which is what is the greatest lesson that your kids have taught you as a parent?
Ooh, greatest lesson kids have taught me. I think is allowing them to be who they are and patience. Because we have in our mind these ideals of what we want our children to be. But I think that's just a filter that we've brought into ourselves from our parents. And I think we need to just remove those visions of what we want our kids to be and let them be. I think that's what they're teaching me at the moment. Otherwise, you're just fighting the whole, against them. So,
Right. And that can be so destructive. And I think that that's probably the root of a lot of people's childhood traumas is the parents having an expectation for their kids. And it's funny because we don't have that with anybody else in the world. Nobody else in the world are we like, going up to even our friends and being like, all right, I expect you to, get a super good job and be making a bunch of money by the time you're 25 or you just don't place those expectations on anybody else. But yet, and we do this for our kids. And I think we want the best for our children. So I think that it's not coming from a place of ill will at all. I think we just want the best for our kids.
Correct.
But you're right. If what you're really talking about is basically you build an identity for them in your own mind and expecting them to fulfill that identity.
Yep.
Is completely against flow. It's completely, and so anytime that you try to force them into that identity, they're going to fight back because that's not respecting their sovereignty. That's not respecting who they are.
And then that's installing the fear in them of not being able to know who they are. They need to almost work it out themselves. You're just providing sort of not the guidelines, but a little bit of guidance for them. Well, this is all this stuff is healing for me. Hey,
yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to talk. It just that's what I love about having conversations with people that are sort of open and honest, because when you get a fresh perspective, it creates new models, it breaks old ones, it just makes you think things completely differently. And like you go on social media and you get like a 2-second glimpse of an echo chamber, or you get a 2-second glimpse of an opposing opinion that pisses you off, and it's just like it doesn't work. So that's why I love long form conversations with people that you can discover and kind of grow together through conversations. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I think we've been so disconnected from ourselves, or society has, that, this is the healing time. And we're lucky we have children and they're young, and, you and I are lucky that we are conscious of this, and we can sort of change the way, the future for us is going, and for hopefully, other people will find value in that, and we'll get some benefit out of it.
Yeah. It's gradually then suddenly is a common one, common saying in Bitcoin.
Yes.
So
well, there's a lot of people waking up. Just need more.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's going to happen naturally. Like a huge theme from today has been leading by example and holding your vibration high for other people. So not only will our kids pick up on it really quick, but just everybody that we interact with will experience it too. So, and they'll begin to question and talk with each other and
that's
build
right.
relationships
That's right.
again. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I might get the kids to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today, or you think we have everything?
No, I think I'm glad your podcast came along, because it's funny when you put out vibrations into the universe, what comes by, and the parenting thing has always been in my mind in the last year. So it's just ironic that I've read a few books recently and whatnot, and it's all coming together at once. Yeah. And that's all about putting your vibration out and being able to receive stuff back. So it's cool.
Yeah. It's like this is with anything. When you put out a vibration, it will come back to you. And that's the idea behind karmic energy is, whatever you put out, you're going to get back. And if you take an action from your true self, you're going to get that same vibration is going to come back to you. And
yes,
I think that's what I'm beginning to experience more and more as I step out of fear and just kind of follow my intuition and my curiosity. So, imagine that on a grand scale. Imagine everybody, these communities growing and it just keeps blossoming.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how much all of this has happened, not just with Bitcoin, but everything to do with my life. And Bitcoin's a part of it.
Right. Yeah, so, I know. Yeah. Something so silly. I mean, it's just something.
I know, it's crazy.
It's like it's money, but I think it's because it's such a big part of everything, of all of the structures of the world that as we know it and understand it, money, once you break that model and once you start to question that as the basis of truth, you're like, what else is not true around me? What else have I been believing finally?
Everything is not true. Yeah. But that's great. You can almost clear that if you just go, well, everything's not true, I'm just going to start again.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, exactly.
And then you just start again, building up the beliefs you want to, and removing those filters, as we say. Yeah. So, it's great. It's fun. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Cool. Rory, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what time. Yeah, we will. All right, so there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Rory. I realize I completely forgot to ask Rory how to get in touch with him, but you can reach out to him on Twitter. His handle is @rhodler, so that's RHODLR. I'm also going to put a link to his Twitter profile in the description as well. As always, guys, really appreciate your support of the show, doing so in any way you can, whether that's sharing, sending some sats, whatever. If you enjoyed it, be sure to reach out to either me, Rory, or just start a conversation. That's what this is all about. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.